Hey everybody, it's Tyler Austin. Thank you so much for watching. So today we're going to analyze Kirk Karwoski's training program. Kirk was undoubtedly one of the strongest people to walk the face of the planet. So we're going to dive into his programming and hopefully learn something from it and maybe even be able to implement some of his methodologies into our own programming. So with that being said, let's dive right on into it. Kirk Karwoski is undoubtedly one of the most popular and probably one of the best powerlifters to walk the face of the earth. He's arguably the best squatter within the sport to ever live. Within his career, he obtained an IPF Junior World Powerlifting Champion. He was a 7-time USPF National Champion and a 6-time IPF World Powerlifting Champion. And he has world records under his name. Most notably his 1,000 for, I believe he's either 1,002 or 1,003 squat in the 125 kilo class. And some of his most famous lifts are undoubtedly his squat at 1,000 pounds for a double. That's probably his most famous lift. That was in training right before the 95 senior championships. But some would argue that even more impressive lift was his 800 squat for 5. He also did that in training, and that was totally raw. He used nothing more than a belt in that 800 for 5 squat, and some would say that's even more impressive than his 1,000 for double, which was geared. But regardless, both are very, very impressive, and it would be hard to argue that he is not the best squatter within the sport. So how did Kirk train? Well, he used a very, very basic 4-day training split that was very common back in the day, back with old school powerlifters. Very similar to how Ed Coan trained, definitely with some differences, but the program setup and the weekly split was very, very similar. We'll dive into Ed Coan's programming in a separate video. But again, Kirk just used a very basic 4-day training split. Again, that was very common with old school powerlifters. On Monday, he would squat, and he would just work up to a single top set of 2 to 8 reps, depending on where he was in the cycle. And that was really it. And just be aware that sets and reps here, these only count work sets, so I'm not counting warm-up sets or anything like that. He would obviously warm up to that top set. But regardless, he would just work up to a single top set of 2 to 8 reps, again, depending on where he was on the cycle. And that was really it. Occasionally, he'd work in some assistance exercises like some leg extensions or leg curls, maybe even leg presses. But Kirk really never gained a lot from assistance movements, unlike Coan, who really benefited very much from them. Kirk did not. So he pretty much removed those He removed a lot of his assistance work, especially from the squat day, and he would just go in on Monday and just squat, and he kind of coined the term squat and leave, and that's exactly what he did. So Monday he would just, again, go in, squat, and work up to a top set, either 2 to 8 reps, again, depending on where he was on the cycle, and leave. And that's all the squatting he did. He squatted once a week and one top set a week, and that was it. That's all the squatting he ever did. Moving on to Tuesday, this was primarily a kind of a light bench and arm day. So he would close grip bench press, and again, he would just work up to a top set of either somewhere between 2 to 8 reps, again, depending on where he was on the cycle. And then after that, he would do some barbell curls for 2 to 3 sets of 5, and some dumbbell curls for, again, 2 to 3 sets of 5. So Tuesday, again, was just more or less a light bench day and an arm day. Moving on to Thursday, this would be his deadlift day, and he would work up to a single top set of somewhere between 2 to 8 reps in the deadlift, and then he would move on, do some grip shrugs at 3 sets of 5, some T-bar rows at 3 sets of 5 to 8, and some dumbbell shrugs for 2 to 3 sets of 5. And finally, Saturday, which was his primary bench day, he would bench press and just work up again to a single top set of 2 to 8 reps. Then he would back off and do some paused wide grip benches for 3 sets of 5. And then incline presses. I don't know what degree those were at. I would assume probably a 30 degree, but I can't say for certain. He would just do incline presses for 3 sets of 5. Front raises, I believe he did those on a machine, 2 to 3 sets of 5. And then side raises for 2 to 3 sets of 5. And that was really it. So as you can tell, Kirk's programming was very, very simple. He primarily stuck with the primary barbell lifts and their close supplemental variations. He would obviously add in some dumbbell work and maybe some machine assistance work here and there. But for the most part, he just stuck with the major barbell exercises, and that was it. Now, obviously, be aware that this is an example. I'm sure from cycle to cycle, things would change. He would add maybe some exercises or swap some exercises here and there. But this is just an example of what he would do, and it's a pretty good example of basically how he structured his training and his programming. In terms of periodization, he just used a very basic linear periodization model that was predominant back then in the old school powerlifting days. He didn't use any complicated block programming, which really wasn't even around at that point anyways, and certainly not DUP. He just used basic linear periodization. Weeks 1 through 2, he'd work up to a top set of 8, and this would be coming off his off-season programming, where during his off-season he really hammered his 8s very, very hard and looked to build a lot of strength in his 8s. And then after his off-season, he would obviously go into his pre-competition cycle, and he would do this where weeks 1 through 2 he'd work up to a top set of 8, and then weeks 3 through 8 he would work up to a top set of 5. Kirk Kowalski, Ed Cohn, and a lot of the old school powerlifters back in the day really stressed the top, the 5 rep set. They thought that was the best rep range for just building a good strength foundation, and I would certainly agree with that. The 5 rep set is just a really, really good rep range for just building general strength, and that's what led them. And they spent a lot of time building up strength in the sets of 5, and they thought that was best to springboard them off to lower rep ranges and to peak themselves out. And typically they would work the sets of 5 for as long as they can with as little gear as possible. So they try to get as strong as possible in the sets of 5, basically raw, and then they would use that to springboard to lower rep ranges, and they would start adding gear as they went along and got deeper into their cycle. So weeks 9 through 10, he would work up to a top set of 3, and then 11 through 12, right before the competition. Typically, week 12 would end probably a week or 2 before the competition, and they would work up to top sets of 2s. So that's really it. I mean, again, very, very simple, not complicated at all. I use Very, very similar training protocol with a lot of my clients. I'm a big fan of the old school 4-day split like this. Uh, the only difference I typically do is on like a is I would do a little bit more overhead pressing. But obviously Kirk was a competitive powerlifter and he put more emphasis on the bench press, of course. So he put more time and effort into that. But I've used very similar templates to this very, very successfully with a lot of my clients and with my own training as well. So this basic 4-day weekly training split is definitely one of my favorites, and and for good reason. It just works really, really well, and a lot of people, not only just normal, regular, everyday people, but competitive powerlifters have used it very successfully. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative. Please like, subscribe, follow, depending on where you're watching this. If you would be interested in coaching, I offer the best and most personalized and most effective online strength and conditioning coaching in the industry. So if that's something you would be interested in, be sure to follow the link down in the description below, and I'd be more than happy to help you. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'm Tyler Austin, and I hope to see you under the bar.